Let's go ahead and get started. We happy few. Wife of Bath's Tale. Sent out a long email, posted it, whatever. Couple of videos, background information about Chaucer, going through the general prologue, where I talk a bit more about the wife of Bath, the character herself, than I'll do today, because I want to get into the tale primarily. We will spend a couple of minutes at least about the prologue. And one comment, I don't remember if I included this in those, if this was in those two lectures, but I'll say it now. Just about every, it's not all of them. Just about every tale gets a prologue, okay, that Chaucer uses to reintroduce us to the tale teller, okay? What I talked about, in the general prologue is that Chaucer gives us, in describing the pilgrims, Chaucer gives us information about each of the pilgrims that will tell a tale. Actually, he gives us information about all the pilgrims, okay? And what he does in that introduction is he kind of gives us two descriptions of each pilgrim. He gives us the description the pilgrim wants to be delivered, but then Chaucer gives us kind of in a subtextual sort of way, he gives us a little bit more, okay? And what he does with the little bit more is he kind of undercuts that surface PR image that the pilgrim wants everybody to see, okay? Here's an example with, for example, the wife of Bath. He tells us about the wife of Bath in the general prologue. She's wealthy. She's been married several times. She's been on all kinds of pilgrimages. She's been to Jerusalem, I think it is 2 or 3 times. She's been to Spain. She's been to Cologne, all these various places, okay? But then he tells us that she gets really jealous as some young girl gets up in the offertory line before her at church. In other words, she wants to be front and center. She doesn't tell us she wants to be front and center. That's Chaucer telling us that. Why is that important? How does that undercut her image of this great holy woman who goes off on these pilgrimages? What kind of, according to that, motivates her? Pride, attention, vanity, narcissism, all those kinds of things. He also gives us the little detail that she has a gap between her 2 front teeth. And you've got a gloss, pretty sure there's a gloss there, that tells us, and if it's not, I'll tell you now, that was a physical indication in the Middle Ages that one was sexually loose. So if you had a gap between your front, how do they got that? I have no idea. Everybody says it, so it's got to be true, right? That if you had a gap between your front teeth, that indicates this person's hot to trot. I mean, you want a good time, this is the one you want to go with, okay? We get to her tale, and her tale comes after the man of law's tale. Man of law's tale is like a saint's life, etc., etc. And she's going to be followed by the friar and such. The wife of Bath's tale introduces, and I'm not going to go into this, but I am going to say this, introduces what's called a marriage group. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tales in this marriage group. So you have the wife of Bath's tale, you have the friar's tale, the Sumner's tale, clerks, merchant, the squire, and the franklin. Now the terminology marriage group comes from George Lyman Kittredge, who was one of the, there were three hugely important Chaucerian scholars in the early 20th century, kind of like a trinity of Chaucerians. Kittredge is one of those. Kittredge was the professor of my Chaucer professor, okay? Kittredge was the one who proposed that these seven form a group all about marriage. The only problem with that is almost all of the tales deal with marriage in some way. That is, marriage is some aspect of the tales. But in these seven, it seems to be the central aspect, okay? So we get to the wife of Bath's turn. And there's some little dialogue between the wife of Bath and the host and somebody else. And then she delivers her prologue. Sorry. And notice how she begins. Experience, though no authority were in this world, were right enough for me. Now, by authority, she means written works, okay? But not just any ordinary written works by church fathers, philosophers, popes, things like that, okay? Where these people are saying, this is the way the world is. You could almost put it this way. No, I won't put it up there. Put it down here. Real life, or to use a Greek word, praxis, versus theory. Okay? She says, experience, really living life, is enough for me. Okay? Even if there were no authority written in the world. So she goes on. Experience, though no authority were in this world, were right enough to me, what? See, to just say experience is the most important thing for her, even if there were no authority, we haven't even gotten to the predicate yet of her statement. To speak of woe that is in marriage. I don't need any authorities. I don't need any philosophers, theologians, thinkers, sociologists, professors, etc., to tell me that there is woe in marriage. She says, I've got enough experience to teach me that. And we're going to find out she's been married 5 times. Okay? So she tells us, 4 lordings, she's addressing the other members of the pilgrimage. Okay? They're not all lords. Only one of them possibly is a lord, and that would be the knight. Everybody else is lower status, lower than the knight is. Okay? She says, since I was 12 years of age, thanks be to God that is eternally alive, husbands at church door, I have had 5. She got married at the first time when she was 12. Yikes. Okay? And she's been married 5 times since then. 5 times total. And I kind of wonder, because she does mention authority, if she / Chaucer was familiar with the medieval version of the life of Saint Mary of Egypt. Saint Mary of Egypt was a 6th, 7th century saint. Okay, very, very briefly. We know about St. Mary of Egypt because she told her life to a guy who wrote it down. It gets preserved, etc., set on, if you accept that it's true. St. Mary told this guy that at the age of 12 she discovered sex. And she liked it. I mean, reveled in it. Nymphomaniac. She lived for sex for 17 years. She didn't charge for it. She just loved it. Okay? So at the age of 29, she's in Alexandria, Egypt, which is coast, port area, harbor. At the age of 29, there's a group of men leaving from Egypt to go to Jerusalem. They're going to go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. I think they're going to celebrate Easter, okay? And she's like, cool, never been to Palestine. I'll go to Palestine too. And I will work my way across the ocean, Mediterranean, so to speak. So they essentially pay her way because she gives them sexual favors, okay? She gets to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and there's a big icon in front of Mary, the Theotokos, before you can enter the doorway to go into the church itself. And she goes up to the doorway, like here's the doorway, and does this. Door's open, but she can't go through it. She tells them, like there is an invisible barrier. And she goes over and stands in front of the icon of Mary and prays, okay? With tears, she told this guy, streaming down her face. She prays, let me go inside and pray and worship in front of the tree upon which Christ was crucified, because at this time, the cross was in the church, okay? The cross on which Christ was crucified was in the church, and goes to the door, she's able to go in. She goes in, she prays, she comes out. She said in the prayer, let me do this, and I will go out and I will go into the Jordan, which means into the desert. She goes into the desert. She lives as an ascetic alone in the desert for 47 years. Fed by, quote unquote, angels and such, okay? But my other reason to bring all that up is all that begins at the age of 12, okay? The wife of Bath says, at the age of 12, I got married. That's also a way of saying what? Introduced to sex, okay? Now, we're going to be told in the prologue, trying to think out. She doesn't say this explicitly. She doesn't say I married number one, number two, number three for money, but it is heavily implied. I mean, at the age of 12, she doesn't have any money. So she is married to this person. She's married to 1 through 3 because they're wealthy. Okay? We're not told necessarily how each of them dies. There has been some speculation that she aged them on their way so that, well, what happens when they die? She inherits the money. So by the time the third one is dead, she's wealthy. Now, the general prologue also tells us some other things about her. She's really skillful in weaving. In fact, we're told her skill rivals those of Flanders and Ghent, which were G-H-E-N-T in the Netherlands, which we know from historical material were the best weaving areas in the world at the time, Western Europe at least, okay? So she's really good at that, and now she's wealthy. Number 3 dies, she marries again, and numbers 4 and 5, they marry her for her money. She's older. Now, we don't know how much older, because, I mean, she gets married at 12. The first one may die when she's 14. You know, she could, by the time she gets to number 4, she could still be in her late teens. All right? But they marry her for money, and she marries them for love. Okay, she doesn't love 1 through 3. So, she goes on in the beginning of the prologue, and talks about, she's been married 5 times. And they were all worthy men, she says, in their degree, in their status. That's line 8, okay? She alludes to the Samaritan woman at the well. That's alluded to in John, or that's discussed in John 4. Jesus goes to the well. He meets the Samaritan woman. Her name, according to early church tradition, like within 100 years, okay, she's referred to by the name Saint Photini. The woman offers Jesus water. He says, if you knew who I was, I would give you water. How can you do that? You don't have a cup, and blah, blah, blah. She's been married 5 times, and the one she's with now is not her husband. And Jesus tells her that without her having said anything about marriage. You're the Son of God, etc., etc. Okay? She goes on then and says, but will I know how to express without lying? God bade us, lines 28 and following, to wax and multiply, to grow and multiply. She says, I can understand that text. And she means literally that written text. Okay? Also, well I know, my husband said to me, he said, mine husband, should leave father and mother and take me. But he didn't say how many husbands. Notice that. But of no number mention made he. That is Jesus. Okay? Of bigamy or of octogamy. 2 husbands, or do it this way, 8 husbands. He never said. Then why should men speak of it as villainy? What? Bigamy or autogamy? Have it, not simultaneously. She's not talking about at the same time. Well, Catholic Church taught you should get married. Why? Because St. Paul says, if you can't live as a virgin, male or female, by the way, if you can't live as a virgin, you should get married. Why? It'll handle that burning lust kind of stuff. So the Catholic Church said, cool, get married, have children. Now, based upon the teachings of St. Augustine, the church taught you should get married, have children. I think I alluded to this before. But you shouldn't enjoy having children. That is the process of creating those wonderful little bundles of blessings. Okay? Because that's sinful. And they got that because of St. Augustine and his notion of original sin. And original sin has to do with sex. All right? That is a extremely oversimplified portrayal. Okay? But that's how the medieval Catholic Church is often portrayed. So, what happens if your husband dies or if your wife dies? The church said, especially if you're young, okay, you can marry again. Not a problem. If your spouse dies, again, you should call it quits at that point. You shouldn't get married again. But if it's absolutely necessary, 3. Never 4. Never 5. How in the world she was able to get 5 husbands at the church door, that is a religious service, not a civil, not going to a justice of the peace or local sheriff who could do kind of civil, common law, so to speak, marriages. That's something that Dale never discusses. How in the world she could get 5 different priests to do the marriage? Now, if you read her tale, her prologue and tale carefully, I think you can probably imagine a way that she could talk a priest into performing a ceremony. She's pretty free with her sex. Okay? Just saying. So, she goes on, and what does she do? Pretty much all throughout her prologue. She says, experience is enough for me to teach me about woe and marriage. But she's going to go on, and she's going to discuss all these different authorities. Okay? She mentioned Solomon. Before that, she talks about Christ, the Gospels. Those are authorities. She'll talk about St. Paul. He's authority. Why? Wives, submit to your husbands. Okay? She mentions Solomon, who knew something about marriage. How so? 300 wives, 700 mistresses. Okay? So she says, I've been blessed by God that I've wedded 5. Welcome the 6th, wherever he shall. That is, her 5th husband, in the ground. What has she kind of just told us? Other than that, number 5 is dead. Exactly right. She's on the prowl. She's looking for number 6, which is why later on in the prologue, one of the other characters is going to interrupt her and say, I was thinking of getting married, but having listened to you, I think I'll back off. Okay? Forsooth, welcome the 6th whenever he shall. Forsooth, I will not keep me chaste entirely in all when my husband is from the world gone. That is, I'm not going to remain sexually chaste once my husband is dead. I'm going to go look for another. Some Christian man shall wed me anon, for then the apostle says, I am free to wed. When? If your husband dies. Bottom of 331, top of 332 at this point. Okay? Sorry. If my husband dies, the apostle says, you can remarry. Paul doesn't say, if your husbands keep dying, you can keep remarrying though. Okay? He says to be wedded is no sin. Better is to be wedded than to, notice, Bryne, B-R-Y-N-N-E, which your gloss tells you means to burn. Look at how it's spelled. Just a little segue into history of the English language. This is an example of what's called metathesis. Chaucer's day, burn was spelled B-R-Y-N. Bird, B-R-I-D. Third, T-H-R-I-D. Metathesis is those 2 internal letters, they get reversed. So we go from Brenda to burn. Threda to third. Breda to bird. Okay, just a little pointing that out. So, she goes on, she talks about Lamech, she talks about Abraham, etc., skipping several lines. Line 62 and following. Where did he command virginity? I know as well as you, it is no dread. Line 5. Do not doubt it. When the apostle speaks of maidenhead, virginity, he said that precept whereof had he none. That is, St. Paul did not have a commandment about virginity. And Paul even says, I don't have this straight from the Lord. This is my thought. Okay? So, men may counsel a woman to be one, that is, single. Lost my place. Where is that? But he put it in our own judgment. It's up to us to decide. Okay? So we're going to skip a bunch again. No, don't have time to talk about all that. She quotes Mark, doesn't quote, alludes to Mark pages 145 and following, talking about barley bread and how Jesus fed the 5,000, et cetera, et cetera. She talked about, women, comparing them to white bread versus barley bread, et cetera. Got to understand, white bread in the Middle Ages. Okay? We think of white bread today as, kind of like not good bread. It was the best bread. Why? Because the flour was most finely ground. Barley bread, like whole grain bread today, is where you can every now and then get a little bit of kernel and you have to kind of crunch it. Well, barley bread in Chaucer's day wasn't real finely ground. People probably cracked their teeth on some of the husks and stuff. It was bread for the poor, right? She says, I am not precious, line 148. I am not precious. Your gloss tells you fastidious, particular if you want, okay? In wifehood, I will use mine instrument as freely as my maker hath it sent. Her sexual organs as freely as God has given them to her. So she's telling her audience, among whom are a parson, a nun, the nun's priest, other nuns, a knight, a miller, a baker, all these kinds of characters. And she's saying, I have sex whenever I want. I like it. Okay? Go on down. The partner interrupts. 163 or so. Back up just a little bit. Just before that, she says, I have the power in my life unto her husband's, his body. Why? Because St. Paul says, husbands, don't deny your wives. Wives, don't deny your husbands unless there's a certain period of time where you're going to abstain from sex. Okay? She says, his body's mine. I like that text. Notice, there are some authorities, so to speak, she agrees with, and some she doesn't. What's Chaucer possibly showing by that?
Is she cherry picking?
That's exactly it. That is exactly it. Okay? If you agree with it, I'm going to use this one. But maybe the very next verse says something opposite. Well, we're just going to skip that one. It's what I often warn students, more so graduate students than undergraduates, if they're writing a paper, don't cherry pick certain things. And when you create an argument, what should you do? Or what should you not do? Let me put it that way.
Not ignore counter arguments. You should always be able to address them.
Future lawyer, you ought to be able to address the counter arguments to the position you're making. Okay? Why? So that you can and do address those in your paper. Like if you go on if any of you go on to graduate school, write a master's thesis or dissertation, you'll have to do that. Because if you don't, the members of your committee will go, what about? And what about? And what about? Okay? It's all part of that preparation process. Lawyers are taught. Well, some of them are. I don't know anymore after what happened at Stanford the other day. Lawyers are taught that they have to be able to argue both sides of a case. You've got to be able to be the prosecutor, and you've got to be able to be the defense attorney. Why? Because if, as a defense attorney, you don't think, you don't prepare for what the prosecutor might say, your client's toast. Your client is going to lose. Okay? So, partner says, by God and by St. John, you are a noble preacher. I was about to get married. What should I buy it on my flesh so dear? That is, why should I endure it in my flesh? Why should I, your gloss says, pay so dearly with my flesh in marriage? Yet I would rather wed no wife this year. Because of what you've said, I'm not going to get married. She says, shh, I haven't even gotten my tail yet. Well, then get to your tail. She's only 170 lines into the prologue. Her tail is 857 lines. Excuse me, her prologue is 857 lines. Her tail is half that. So why does Chaucer do that? Why does he spend so much time on her prologue and comparatively so little on the tail?
To just set up the background information you need to understand the tale.
And, I mean, all true. He's setting her up. Okay? He's creating this very full picture of the wife for us. But then he's going to tell the tale. And as I said in the 2 video lectures, Chaucer always undercuts, take that back, nearly always undercuts the teller of the tales. Tellers of the tales. There are only 2 that Chaucer doesn't undercut. There are only 2 tellers that Chaucer portrays fully, entirely as people to be praised. Okay? The parson and his brother the plowman. They are the only 2, because they are the only 2 in the entire group that show no signs of hypocrisy. They do what they say. They live what they preach. Okay? So, a couple more things about the prologue. A couple more things to point out. So the partner says, okay, go on. Lines 184 and following. Continue forth as you began. Spare no man. Teach us young men of your practice, of your practice. Meaning, teach us young, innocent men about you dangerous women. What is the wife becoming for someone like the partner? Is the partner going to learn from this? She's becoming an authority. She rails against authorities. And in doing that railing against authorities, she sets herself up as an authority on marriage. Okay? Why? Because she's been married 5 times and she's looking for another one. Okay, let me pause for a second. Let's say you and your significant other are considering, you just started to talk about getting married. Who do you want to consider, who would you consider as an authority on marriage? Somebody who's been married, Rupert Murdoch, Donald Trump, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, 7. Zsa Zsa Gabor was married like 12 times, something like that. Or someone who was married once for 50 years. Do you want to do it again and again and again and again and again and again, or one and done? Most people, not all, most people would say, I'm going to kind of go with the advice from the one and done group, from the people who figure it out with the woe how to make it work. Okay? So, she says, I will. I pray to all this company that if I speak after my fantasy, my imagination, etc., don't take it in grief what I say, for my intent is but to play. What's she saying? don't take what I say seriously. I'm just having fun with y'all. That's kind of what she's implying. Okay? So she goes on. She tells us about her husbands, which I'm going to skip almost all of, until we get to her last one. And to me, there's some ambiguity. Is her last one the one named Jenkin, or is Jenkin number 4? Because at one point it mentioned Jenkin as number 4, but it sounds like Jenkin was her last husband at the same time. What did her last husband do? Frequently.
Beat her.
Louder?
Beat her.
Beat her. What else? He read from what?
Religious writings.
Yeah, that's being a little.
About the nature of women.
He read anti-feminist tracts. Okay, anti-feminist dogma, if you want, which she didn't like. So what did she do with this book? First she pulled a leaf out, then she pulled 3, and he beats her more. In the final scene we get, well, it's not quite the final scene, but the penultimate scene, so to speak, that we get between she and Jenkin, and it's in her discussion about their beginning, where's her name first mentioned? Page 339, bottom of the right-hand column, 547 and so. Her name is Dame Alice, or Allison, okay? So, she marries Jenkin, page 341, line 625 and following. He has his book. So she says, 7:11. But now to purpose, why I told thee that I was beaten for a book, that is, to get to my point about how I was beaten because of a book. She says, upon a night Jenkin, that was our sire, your master, read on his book as he sat by the fire, what? Of Eve first. What did Sir Gawain do? Eve, Delilah, Bathsheba. I'm missing one. Eve,
Samson's wives.
Delilah, Samson's wife. Solomon. Eve, Delilah, Solomon, his wives, Bathsheba, etc. Okay? So she says, and because of Eve, that wretchedness came to mankind, etc., etc. Talks about Samson, talks about Socrates with his wives, etc., etc. All right? Just a whole list. I mean, everything from like 715 through 785 and following. So what does she do? Line 790. Suddenly, she grabs the book, pulls a page out. Right as he read. And also, I with my fist so took him on the cheek. That is, she smacked him upside the head. That in our fire he fell backward soon, he upstairs as doth a wounded lion, and with his fist he smites her on the head, so that she lay as if she was dead. And what does he think? Oh my God, I've killed her. He goes down, he begs her, prays that she's okay. Dear sister Allison, she's not his sister, it just means, dear one, okay? As help me God, I shall never more smite. That I have done, it is myself to white, to blame, etc. Forgive me, I beseech thee. And she smacks him. No, she's not dead. She gets up. She smacks him and says, there, now we're equal. But at last, 8:11, with much care and woe, we fell accorded by ourselves too. That is, what does accord mean? To hurt. Okay? They became of one heart. He gave me all the bridle in my hand. What bridle? What's a bridle for? B-R-I-D-E-L, not A-L. To guide a horse. You put the bit in the mouth, and the bridle's attached to it, and reins attached to that. What do? You pull to the right, the horse goes to the right. You pull to the left, horse goes to the left. You pull back, the horse stops. He gave me the bridle. Meaning, I said, Jenkin, go to the right. Whoa, boy. To have the governance of house and land. He gave her control of the house and the property. Which is kind of interesting. Okay, Chaucer's writing this late 14th century, probably late 1380s, very early 1390s. And yet, if you go back to New Testament times, 1st century AD, women had control of the house. They controlled the accounts. Okay? At least in Greek society they did. Pretty sure that applied also to Hebrew society. Anyways. Gave me governance of house of land, and of his tongue, and his hand also, and made him burn his book anon right then. So he gives her control of house, land, his tongue, and his hands. Okay, but think of what that means. He gives him. That means they are what to begin with? They're his. Okay? And when that I had gotten unto me by mastery, all the sovereignty, and that he said, my own true wife, do as the lust desire. That's what lust means. Do as he desires to term of all thy life. Whatever you want, honey. Do whatever you want. Does that mean, is that like the phrase, modern usage, whatever? No. Because whatever means I don't give a damn. He's saying, I want you to be happy. Blank check, you know? Keep thine honor and keep also my estate. After that day, we never had a debate. No more arguments. Why are you looking at me like that?
Well, there are so many different ways to read that.
Yeah.
You can read it as like, there's no debate now because she's qualified to take care of the house, and maybe that was causing, distress in their marriage. Or now there's no argument because he's not being fed, all this stuff about blaming women for everything. And when you take what is ingrained in your brain and kind of society as well out of that situation, this habitual blaming of someone else for your issues, that will definitely affect a marriage if your marriage partner is that of the group that you're blaming. It could be that, or it could kind of be like, okay, I'm just gonna back up, give you whatever, and it's kind of like not caring while caring.
Okay.
Which is interesting.
So there's no more debate. So she says, God help me so, I was to him as kind as any wife from Denmark into India, etc., and also true, and so was he to me. I pray to God that sits in majesty, so bless his soul for his mercy dear. Now let me get to my tale. And then she gets interrupted again. The friar laughs. In the general prologue, we're given a description about the friar. Okay, the friar goes around, he does certain services. Priors weren't necessarily priests. They could do marriages and other services and such. But we're told that the friar was unto the orders, he was a noble post who paid for young women's marriages at his own cost. Why might he have done that? Well, we're also told that he was kind of young and lusty himself. The implication is he's already slept with those young women. And the reason he's paid for the marriages is he's buying off the husbands. Because in medieval society, it was a practice after the marriage night to display bloody sheets out the house door, right, window, whatever, as a sign of she was a virgin. Everything's cool now. I'm not kidding. Okay. There's other poems that refer to this. This is his way of going. No bloody sheet the night after. Everything's taken care of. So he pays for it on his own. So the friar interrupts. Now, dame, so I have joy or bliss. This is a long. Get to the point, woman. And when the summoner hears that, the summoner says, by God's arms too. By God's two arms, right? A friar will entremit him evermore. You've got a gloss down there. A friar will always put himself in the middle of things. Possible pun. All right? Knowing Chaucer, Chaucer's like Shakespeare. If there's a pun and if there's a dirty pun, if there's a double or triple or quadruple entendre, he'll go for it, even if it falls flat. He says, lo, good men, a fly and also a friar will fall in every dish and matter. What speaks thou of preambulation, etc., etc.? And the friar says, you know, I think I'm going to tell a tale of a summoner. And the friar does. And the friar's tale is about a homosexual summoner. Okay? Watch A Knight's Tale with Heath Ledger and Paul Bettany, because the character of Chaucer meets up with a friar, with a partner and a summoner. The partner and the summoner here are traveling together, okay? Meets up with them, and the summoner is the spitting image of the description that we get in here. He's got a round, kind of pasty, sickly, ill-looking face, probably because he has a venereal disease, okay? Anyways, the wife finally gets to her tale. I finally get to the wife's tale 47 minutes later than I wanted to. Her tale's 407 lines long. Okay, so what's the prologue all about? Is it about this? Ultimately, no. It's about mastery in marriage. Who's on top? I don't mean physically, I mean hierarchically. Maybe physically too if you want to go there, but I don't really. Who controls? Okay? In the old days of King Arthur, of which the Britons speak great honor, all this land was filled of fairy. That is, Britain was full of fairies everywhere, of elves, etc., etc. Okay? But now, she says, we don't see any elves anymore. The fairies are all gone. Why? 865, for now the great charity and prayers of limiters and other holy friars. Limiters, friars who are licensed to preach in a limited area in a parish or a county. So, friars and friars, what is she doing? She's getting back at the friar. Okay? Because of these friars, what? There aren't any more elves because they go around sprinkling holy water everywhere. The implication is holy water is bad juju for elves and such. Okay? So they've gone away. Let's see. Early afternoons, evenings, line 875, the friar says his matins, his holy things as he goes in his limited area. Women may go safely up and down the countryside. In every bush or under every tree, there is no other incubus, devilish spirit, who would appear to women in dreams and thereby impregnate them. There is no other incubus but he, that is the friar. And he won't do them any dishonor. Will do them nothing but dishonor. Okay? So, once upon a time, and so befell, Arthur had a lusty bachelor in his house, that on a day he did what? Came riding from a river, and it happened that all alone, like the day he was born, he sees a maid walking before him. Notice the setting. It's very similar to Lawnval. He comes riding away from Arthur and the group. There's a river and there's a woman. Lawnval, there's a river, there's a woman. Reverse scenario though. Of which maid anon, despite her will, her head, if you want, by very force, he bereft her of her maidenhead. Rapes her. For which oppression was such outcry and such pursuit unto the king, that is, she ran to Arthur. That damned was this knight for to be dead by course of law. Course of law. Part of that Pentecost oath, knights were forbidden to force themselves on women. That's why Sir Gawain says, when she says, oh, you're so much stronger than me, da, da, da. And any woman in her right mind would never, say no to you. He goes, in my country, force isn't looked on like that. Okay? So, Arthur says, Guinevere, your choice. The queen thanked the king. She says, young knight, notice, he's never named. Just, young knight, you're screwed. Unless you can answer one question. 905. What thing is it that women most desire? Mel Gibson and Helen Hunt did a movie back in the 90s. What women want. Okay? Beware and keep thy neck bone from iron. Answer that question and you'll save your neck. Okay? So, I give you a year. Woe was this night, and sorrowfully he sighs. But he may not do as he wants to. And at the last he chose time to go. 9:19. He seeketh every house and every place, whereas he hopeth for to find grace to learn what thing women love most. But he never could arrive in no coast or region, whereas he might find in this matter two creatures agreeing, can't say that word, in frere, that is, in companionship, together. He can't find two women anywhere to agree what women want most. Here are some of the answers. Guys, you might want to take note of this, by the way. Some said honor. Women love best. Some said women love best riches. Some said honor. Some said jolly, or jollity, jolliness. Some said nice clothes, rich array. Some said great time in bed, lust to bed. And oft time to be widow and wed. Nice little dig at herself, because that's the wife of Beth, right? Some said that our hearts are most refreshed when we're flattered and pleased. Oh, honey, you look great today, And he's not far from the truth. I will not lie, the wife says. A man shall win us best with flattery and with attendance and with busyness, that is, waiting on her hand and foot. We are well limed, both more or less limed. Lime was used to catch birds. Okay? That is, you do this, you got us. Hook, line, and sinker. Some say we love best to be free and to do right as we please. That's why I put the freedom here for this. And that no man should reprove us or complain to us of our vice, that is, our sleeping wherever and with whomever we want. Okay? And some say, well, we just get a big long list. Okay? And what does she do? She goes to authorities. Line 951. Witness King Midas. Who Ovid, etc. Okay? Going to skip a bit. Line 82. 3. This night of which my tale especially, when that he saw, he might not come thereby, that is to say, what women love most. Within his breast full sorrowful was the ghost, but home he goes. That is, like Sir Gawain trying to find the Green Chapel, he rides through the length and breadth of Britain. All different answers. He's got a book of all the different answers. He's heading back home. Why? Hey, I'm damned. I'll take my shot. He goes home. He might not sojourn, that is, delay. The day was come that homeward must he turn, and in his way it happened him to ride in all this care under a forest side, whereas he saw upon a dance go of ladies 24 and yet more. He sees off in the distance 24 ladies dancing, and he's kind of like, haven't asked them. I'll go ask them. Toward the which dance he draws himself, and they're gone. Except for one. Save on the green, line 98, he saw sitting a wife, a fowler white, there may no man devise. Imagine. So conjure up the utter image of ugliness, and that's her. What? Put all the ugly together. That's her. Okay? Just think of all the, get on the internet, ugly women. Put them all, mash them up all into one. That's her. Okay? Again, this night, this old whiff gan rise. Against, that means just opposite. He sees her, and he's kind of like, oh my God. She sees him and gets up. She starts going towards him and says, Sir Knight. Sir Knight. Because she's old and foul and skin falling off, one eye here, one breast here, just, everything's wrong about this woman. Hereforth knoweth no way. That is, you can't go through here. This is dead end. Yeah, he really is at a dead end, right? Tell me what you seek by your faith. That is, be honest. Peradventure, it may the better be. Maybe I can help you. These old folk know much things, said she. Right? Because old people have experienced a lot. I was just reading a long Substack article, finished it today, started a couple days ago, about a bad thing in our society, and it's relatively recent, like in the last 100 years, is this segregation by age, where we have preteens separated from teens, teens separated from people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. 100 years ago, you didn't have that separation. 100 years ago, you didn't have the idea of adolescence. And even the word teenager. Why? Because someone who was 13 and 14 was working alongside someone who was 40 or 50. Okay? And what did that do? They learned from that person. They learned how to take on responsibility, how to be grown, all that kind of stuff. So, old people know a lot. My dear mother, he says, showing what, by the way? Respect. He doesn't go away, ugly foul hag. Not yet. He's going to do that on the wedding night. Says the knight, I'm dead. Unless I can answer what thing it is that women most want. could ye me wissa I would well quit your hera. If you could tell me, I would repay you your hire. I will requite you. Oh, you won't go away, broke from this. She says, plight me thy troth. Promise to marry me. Here in my hand. What's that mean? This used to mean something. It doesn't mean anything in American society. Not really. Shake on it. Give me your hand. Shake on it. Because that means all of his honor, all of his integrity, which I admit, a little sketchy since he raped a girl. The next thing that I require thee, that shall it do if it lie in thy might, and I will tell you before we get tonight. So, plight me your troth, promise me the next thing I ask of you, you will do. To plight one's troth typically means marry me, but she doesn't say exactly that. It's kind of implied. Just do what I ask of you if it's in your power. Here, I grant it. Okay, ready? Are we ready? I dare me well avant, that is, I will dare boast, your life is safe. I know the answer. For I will stand thereby. And what she means by that is, and I will stand as your guarantor. That what I'm about to tell you is the truth. That is, no woman will be able to say she lies. Okay? If they say that, I will pay the cost. Off with their head. Okay? Upon my life, the queen will say as I. Let's see which is the proudest of them all, that we're on the coverchief for a call, that wears a head covering, okay, or hairnet, that dare say not of what I shall tell you. He says, okay. They go to the court. And the knight says, I can tell you. Ready was his answer as he said, 1026. Full many a noble wife, and many a maid, and many a widow. For that they are wise, the queen herself sitting as justice, assembled men, his answer for to hear. So, Guinevere gets all the women of Camelot to come as jurors, so to speak. All right? They command everyone to shut up. Silence is commanded. The knight, so that the knight could tell in their audience. What's the answer? My liege lady, why, feudal society, she's his sovereign. In 1038, women desiring to have sovereignty as well over their husband as their love. Now that can mean as well over their husband, the husband's body, as also their love, who the husband loves, or it could mean the women's love, to have control over that. So I control my husband, but I sleep with whoever I want. It might be you, husband, or it might be Joe next door. As well over their husband as their love, and for to be in mastery him above. Okay? To call all the shots. This is your most greatest, dearest, etc. desire. Though you kill me, do as you want, I'm at your will. And all the court was there never wife, nor maid, nor widow, that contraried. I love that verb, contraried. We don't use contrary as a verb anymore. That he said. They all said, oh yeah. Yep, that's right. But said he was worthy of his life. And the old wife then starts up and says, mercy, my sovereign lady queen, before you send away the court, I told the knight this answer, and what? He plighted me his truth then, his troth. his faithfulness. That the first thing I would require of him, he would give it. And she turns to the knight and says, marry me. Getting breast down here, nose over here, eye up here, you know, freak of radiation and everything. Marry me. Take me unto thy wife, for well thou knowest that I have kept thy life. If I say false, say nay upon thy fay. Alas, and well away. Oh, I know right well what you said was true. For God's left. Want something else? I'll give you my horse. You can have my saddle. You can have all my riches. Not me. Take all my goods and let my body go. Nay, I shrew curse us both. For though I be foul, notice a little self-knowledge here. I be foul, old, and poor. I desire not for all the metal nor for ore that under the earth is buried, or lies above, except, that's what but means, if thy wife I were, and also thy love. Not for all the wealth in the world, or above the world. How is there wealth above the world? Heaven. I want one thing. Your body and your love. Or I want to be your wife and to be your love. My love? No, my damnation. Now, he doesn't mean hell damnation. Alas, that any of my nation, the gloss tells you family, should ever so foul disparaged be. What's he mean? How would his family be disparaged by her?
Is he saying that she's too old to have kids and continue the family line?
No, the last thing is really close, but not about having kids.
You mean marriage?
Why?
Because she's so ugly and old.
Close. What's he mean by any of my nation, my family, would be disparaged by marriage to her?
She would lower his social status.
Bingo. She's not of high birth. She's not aristocratic. She's lowborn. But all for naught, the end is this. I was forced into this. Okay? He needs her, must wed, and take his old wife and go to bed. That is, he was forced. Okay? Now would some men peradventure that for my negligence I do no curd, that is, I don't show any care, to tell you the joy and all the array that at the feast was that same day. In other words, they have a big wedding party. Arthur and Guinevere pull out all the stops. Okay?
It's more of a punishment.
Great was the woe the knight had in his thought, 1083, when he was with his wife a bed, notice, he brought, not went. It was a custom for wedding guests to escort the bride and groom to their bedroom. Lock the door from the outside. You don't get out until the marriage is consummated, until those sheets are hanging out the window. He wallows and turns to and fro. His old wife lay smiling evermore and says, "Oh, dear husband, benedicite, fareth every night." Really? Is this how all knights are on their wedding night? Is this the law of Arthur's house? Pretty similar to what the Green Knight told Sir Gawain about why he was sent to judge the reputation of Arthur's house. Is every knight of his so dangerous? I'm your own love and your wife. I saved your life, man. And certainly, I didn't do anything unright to you. That is, I didn't do any injustice to you. Why fare you thus with me this first night? Okay? What is my guilt? What is my sin? She asks. For God's love, tell it, and I'll fix it. How have I wronged you? Tell me, I'll make it right. What's the knight thinking?
You forced me into this situation.
Okay,
There's nothing you can change about yourself.
how are you going to change that? You're so god-awful ugly. How are you going to change that?
You met her at a river. She's Faye.
Does he know that?
Probably
Not
He's
necessarily.
He doesn't think real hard.
What else? You're old. How many of us can turn back time? If I could turn back time, believe me, my knees would still work. My shoulder would be fine. Okay? She's of low birth. How do you undo that? Even in our modern society, you don't earn that by becoming the wealthiest person in the world. Because in the eyes of a certain segment of society, you will never equate with them. The blue blood, the aristocracy, the true upper class. Doesn't matter how much money you have, you'll never be part of that class. Okay? He says, amended, it won't be amended forever. Why? Thou art so loathly. You are so god-awful ugly. And old, and come of so low a kind, a nature. Your gloss says lineage. That little wonder is though I wallow and twist about. So would God break my heart. And she says, that's the problem. What did she tell him? Tell me your problem and I'll fix it. Yes, he replies. I could amend this also if I want to. Before it was daylight. Okay, so I could change all that. So well might you bear your vow unto me. In other words, honor your vow. I can amend all this. I could be unloathly. The opposite of loathly is what? Gorgeous. Okay? I could be unold, young. And I could be unlow, highborn. But you speak of such she uses, Chaucer uses two L's, correct? Or is it just one? Yep, two L's. You speak of such gentilessa. Okay. Did he use the word gentilessa? No, he didn't. What's meant by it? Nobility, virtue, worth. You speak of such gentilessa as is descended out of old riches. That therefore should ye be gentlemen, such arrogance is not worth a hymn. What is she getting at? What does he say is the difference, the lady is suggesting, between himself and her. He comes from what kind of people? In Flannery O'Connor's A Good Man is Hard to Find, when she finally realizes the misfit's going to kill her, she says, "Pray Jesus, I know you're not common. I know you come of good people, good blood." She's making a distinction between growing up on the wrong side of the tracks as opposed to the right side of the tracks. If you're familiar with Parks and Rec TV show, it's the people of Pawnee versus the people of the fictional town next door that I can't remember. You know, he says this comes from what? His birth. His birth. What's an aristocratic family in the United States? Not aristocratic like British noble dukes, earls, that kind of thing, but real upper class.
Nepo babies.
Pardon?
Nepo babies.
I mean, give me a name of a family. Not the Kardashians. Vanderbilts. Kennedy. Bush. Why? Families go way back. Inherited wealth, etc. Kardashians is self-made wealth. Oddly enough, I don't want to go there. Kardashians are those who will never be in that class. Even though each of the girls is worth billions on their own for doing nothing. Okay? Billions. What's her point? Your blood doesn't mean anything. King Charles, Prince William, Prince Harry. There's a problem right now in the royal family between Harry and Charles and William and just about everybody else. Andrew's over there on his own, you know, because fooling around with Epstein and everything on the Lolita Express. Well, he said it. Yes, I did. Okay. What's Harry's problem? He didn't marry right. And I don't mean race, not that at all. Meghan, I mean, an actress, really? How much lower can you get if you're royal? Because actors, actresses, historically low, real low in society, okay? So she says, "Look who that is most virtuous always, privately, secretly, and apart, and most intends always to do the gentle deeds that he knows, that is able to do." Okay? Take him for the greatest gentleman. That is the person who does virtuous deeds where? Is it the billionaire who says in front of the TV cameras, "I'm giving $20 million to"? No. It's the billionaire or the person who makes 20 grand a year who every week goes and gives money to the soup kitchen quietly or serves at the soup. That is gentilessa. That is noble behavior. Has nothing to do with blood. Okay? And then she gives an example. Christ, will we claim of him our gentilessa? Christ wants us to desire from him our idea of this. Nobility, virtue, worth, not nobility, hierarchy. Not of our elders for their old riches. That is, for their money that gets passed down from family to family to family to family, etc. For though they give us all their heritage, that is the stuff we inherit, for which we claim to be of high parentage, I'm a Kennedy, I'm a Bush, I'm a pick your, I'm a Clinton even though the Clintons are hierarchically really low. Bill Clinton more so than Hillary. Hillary came from upper middle class family. Bill, dirt, okay? For which you claim to be of high parentage, yet may they not bequeath for nothing to none of us their virtuous living. What can parents not pass on to their children? You can pass on a name, you can pass on money. What can you not pass on? Proper behavior. Because where does that have to come from? That comes from us, individually. What time is it? 9:20. That made them be called. It's that virtuous living that made them be called gentlemen in the first place, she is saying. That's where the name came from. But in Britain, at this time, and even later, you could only be called gentlemen if what? If you came from a certain level of society. Okay? You could only have a coat of arms if you came from a certain level of society. Until about Shakespeare's day. And then you could buy one. It was expensive. Shakespeare bought a coat of arms for his father shortly before his father's death. And that signified gentleman. He got the status. Remember, if you've seen Mary Poppins, okay? There's a scene in Mary Poppins towards the end where Mr. Banks goes back to the bank. It's after his children have caused a run on the bank because the bank won't give them their tuppence, okay? If you're familiar with the scene, he goes in, and what does the old bank president's son do? Anybody know? He takes Mr. Banks' bowler hat, which is a sign of status. It means he's a gentleman, and punches a hole through it, meaning broken, no longer a gentleman. You're going to be a nobody, okay? And what does he learn? That doesn't mean anything. You don't get nobility through status. But God bade us follow him in such degree. Well could, and what does he do? She starts citing authorities. Dante. Chaucer loved Dante. He refers to Dante everywhere, okay? And he goes on and says, everyone knows this as well as I. That is, the lady says this. Line 1133. If gentle lesser were planted naturally unto a certain lineage down the line, privy not apart, then would they never find to do of gentlest the fair office. They might do no villainy or vice. If gentilessa was passed on biologically, then she is saying the offspring, the famous people, would never behave how? Horribly, boorishly. They wouldn't rape people. Okay? She goes on. Big, long discussion. We've only got a minute. She kind of just keeps image after image, so that finally she says to the knight, 12:19. And I'll come back to this briefly. Get my days right. A week from today, okay? Before we go off and talk about the Renaissance and such. Choose now one of these things too. Okay? You can have me foul and old till that I die, and I will be to you true and humble and never displease you. Or You can have me young and fair. You could take your chances of the repair that shall to be to your house because of me. Repair means the turnstile I'm going to put in at the door for all the lovers who are going to come in. Okay? Have me young and beautiful, and take your chance that I'm just going to take the door off the hinges and say, come and get me. Here's your choices. Old, ugly, true, or young, beautiful, and maybe false. Take your pick. That night considers and sighs. My lady and my love and my wife so dear. Notice the first word he used. My lady. You don't use lady to refer to a scullery maid. The lady is a wife of a lord. Okay? My lady, he's just done what? He's elevated her. My love, wife so dear, I put me in your wise governance. In other words, what you choose. He just gave her mastery. He just said, not my choice. You choose your own destiny. You choose your own path. You do what makes you, and happy and such. Okay, we'll stop there because we're a minute over. Have a good weekend. Think, if you haven't started to think about paper project, whatever you're going to think about doing, because it is coming up 2 weeks from Tuesday is when that is due. I do have a